Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It is Wednesday, June 5th, 2019. Brief pause there as I momentarily considered, maybe I'll just bag it. Turn off the computer, turn off the microphone. Who needs a show? President Trump is, I guess, still overseas. I don't know. I'm not tracking his movements, really, although I did just see Ivanka Trump somehow tweeting that she was on her way to The Hague, which sounds promising, but I think she's going of her own volition, so it can't be that good. But as Charles Pierce said, this one looks like a layup, everybody. We'll just let that one stand on its own. A little bit of noise in the background, some computer whirring. We are temporarily down one computer this morning. I don't know, something went on. And so it's rebooting and installing all the things I don't need or something. We'll see if we can get that one back up to speed. Greg Dworkin is preparing his Raft O stories in the background. Joan McCarter we're without this week, as she is unfortunately, as I said in the Morning Post, finds herself on the same continent once again as Donald Trump. This is usually the case here at home, but it's just poorly, well, it's not poorly planned. It's just an unfortunate coincidence at this moment. Anyway, so yes, June 5th, and tomorrow marks the big D-Day anniversary, so hold your breath and cringe while we wait for Trump to say something awful and ruin all of that. He has, of course, already made some remarks on it, so he's gearing up to ruin the situation. I think he said, after his fashion, it was a liberation like no one had ever seen before, which, is kind of, he's not too far off the mark, obviously, but it's just, it's fall back to his standard stock phrases like no one had ever seen before. I don't know. It's just sort of disappointing. Anyway, plenty of other stories to round up. Nothing, I don't know. Would you say anything was dominating the Twitter situation this morning? I paid a little bit less attention overnight and into the morning. There were a lot of distractions going on. But like I said, Greg has got his stories ready to roll. That's what we're going to be depending on, I think, to get us grounded. We missed Monday, so we missed Greg. It was very disconcerting. But like I said, plenty of stories to catch up on, lots of impeachment news, lots of justification for impeachment circulating out there. I guess the biggest bump in that trajectory came from the news yesterday that Harry Reid and now backs the idea of opening an impeachment inquiry. And I don't think we're going to need to rehash all of the work we've done in the past, differentiating between articles of impeachment, removal from office, and the initiation of an impeachment inquiry. I think we've all got that one down, but you need to know it. You need to be able to recite it from memory so that you can discuss it, because most of the country apparently still not entirely sure what the difference is. But Harry Reid is on board. Liberal, hippie, idealist, pie-in-the-sky, kumbaya singing sap that he is. Reid backs Trump impeachment inquiry, reports, I have The Hill open, but surely you could, I was going to say you could do better with an original source, but apparently the original source is USA Today, so I don't know. I mean, it's a little better as a source than The Hill, but online-wise, I am not ready this early in the morning to click on a USA Today link and spend 15 minutes trying to fend off the pop-ups and scroll over ads and all sorts of things to get the story. So we'll stick with The Hill, as bad as it is. Poor Zach Budrick has been given the assignment of rewriting this piece for The Hill. Former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, you know who he is. You know him. You love him. He's the boxer guy. You remember. Said in an interview published Monday that the House should open up an impeachment inquiry into President Trump despite counseling against the move earlier. So he's a guy that leaves room for reconsideration of these things. And you know how the Senate is with moving to reconsider things. They love to do that all the time. And he's reconsidered this. He just basically comes down to it's not the right thing to do nothing. It's not the right thing to jump into impeachment without doing an inquiry. That's the key distinction here. But it's not right to stand by and do nothing. And that way of thinking about impeachment, that maybe we ought to just leave things the way they are and just wait for the election to roll around 2 years from now, is falling by the wayside. So that, I think, is good news. Greg Dworkin, you're ready to go. Well, let's just jump into what you've got collected here. Good morning. Welcome back. We missed you on Monday.
Hey, good morning.
How's everything?
So there's all sorts of stuff going on, right?
Well, that's what they say.
I saw this great cartoon I think it was from the London Observer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure exactly where it was from, but the Queen is toasting Donald Trump, and she says to him, "Here's to D-Day." And he says, "Oh, stop talking about my grades." And,
okay.
The other one was Queen Elizabeth dressed up in all her finery next to Trump in his ill-fitting tuxedo that everybody's making fun of.
Really
and the thought balloon from the Queen is inappropriate attire. Mm-hmm. And the next panel is Trump in his ill-fitting suit, and the Queen is dressed in hazmat.
Okay.
It just gives you an idea of how things went. I don't know if there's truth to the rumor that when the royal band greeted Trump, they played the Palpatine March from Star Wars. That was going around the internet. I don't know if it's true, but it's pretty funny. It was
a funny thing. I don't think so. My viewing of the BBC footage of it was that, they played the standard hits. But whoever doctored it up did it really well to make it sound like they got audio of it being played over a television speaker. They did a good job mocking it up. I don't believe that was real, but I wish.
The other mock-up that was really fun this morning is Ivanka Trump's tweet en route to The Hague.
Yeah.
And, of course, Darth said, "We know," and everybody else said it's about time. And, that just goes with that,
I didn't know that was there on there.
It gives you an idea of right. Her having the finger on the pulse of American culture and politics,
Yes, something. The finger, also something.
The finger, it's what you really need to do is go to Versailles.
Yes, right. That's their kind of place. I will say that they don't have. I think they like visiting European royalty. Their sense of decor is not quite as ridiculous by comparison. I think they're surrounded by that. Oh, well, this is high class when it's all.
Well, they go to Versailles and they think not enough gilt.
Yeah, right. And by the way, while you're in The Hague, same thing. Not enough gilt. But all right. Well, I don't know what she's doing in The Hague. I don't know what she's doing. Instagramming herself about going into meetings when she should be in the damn meeting. But
she doesn't really belong in any of the meetings because she's a doofus and doesn't have any official position that requires her to be there. But
yeah, everybody has to sit and wait.
As Bill Crystal pointed out, the whole point of having the family meet the Queen is that they're trying, with Maggie Haberman's help in the New York Times, to push this whole concept that this is the royal family and Ivanka's the princess.
Yes, I don't know why that's happening.
Just like the Kennedys, except not.
Right.
I don't know that anybody ever confused Melania for Jackie Kennedy, for example.
No. There you go.
No,
that's
no.
The whole,
there's a big no.
Imitation.
Anyway, so lots of stuff is happening.
Joe
Sure, a lot of it has to do with. Let me do some of the silly stories first.
Oh.
I thought you said above my eye.
The silly stories.
The silly stories.
I got
you. This one on Twitter: Texas will allow the killing of wild boars without a license.
Yes.
I love that. I mean, what if the boars have a license but it's expired? Doesn't that seem like particularly cruel?
I know. I
Texas
think it's over
is a tough
the top.
place.
Are they voting? What's the problem?
Yeah, exactly. Well, speaking of voting, one of the things that happened in Texas is that there's a story in Huffington Post. Texas governor asked officials before the 2018 election to hunt for non-citizen voter records before the botched purge.
Yeah, they're hunting for everything.
Right. And the story goes on to say David Whitley, who just was an abbot aide and then was the acting Secretary of State in Texas and started this botched review and then Texas Democrats refused to confirm him because of his role in the debacle, and he resigned his position in late May. Now, the governor said the governor had nothing to do with it, but these emails show that the governor's office, in fact, was right in the middle of it.
Wow, Bridgegate.
Pretty much. So it's quite an interesting turn in Texas, which is already getting a little bit more purple. And one of the things that happens, and maybe we'll talk about this conservative war that they're having as part of this. But because the Republicans see power slipping away, or at least the potential for power slipping away, because they still have it all, they have engaged in a long-term, predates Trump, effort to pack the courts and change the voting laws in order to stay in power.
Yes,
right?
sure.
Voter ID, voter suppression, all this stuff. Voting Rights Act was there for a reason, and that obviously goes back a long, long way. Or as Adam Serwer puts it in the Atlantic, a white man's republic if they can keep it.
Oh, they'll keep it.
And they're talking about the census case, of course. And the Supreme Court will have to decide whether America is a nation for all its citizens, but that's a story for another day. In any case, you have a situation where Republicans feel power slipping away, whether it's true or not. And so the question is, how far do they go in terms of preserving what they have? And in that context, a fight broke out over, of all things, a drag queen reading hour to children in a library in San Francisco.
Huh.
Now, I happen to think drag queens are very entertaining, so the kids might really think it's funny. But apparently the social conservatives were absolutely outraged. And Nicholas Grossman has a really nice story about this. Conservative circles are currently engaged in a debate between two approaches to politics in the broadest sense, not just political office, but the entire enterprise of advancing interest in the public sphere. And believe it or not, this is going to relate back to impeachment. The debate primarily concerns whether social conservatives, especially Christians, both Catholic and Protestant, should respect classical liberal values or abandon them to fight the culture war. Okay.
Yeah, abandon classical values.
Did you hear about this? Is this new to you?
The reading hour thing?
This is the Sohrab Ahmari fight with David French.
No, I mean,
you may have come across it on Twitter.
I think I saw something and I said, David French is fighting with someone. What do I care?
Yeah, right, exactly. So I'm going to explain to you why you should care.
All right, good.
Right?
I love caring.
New York Post editor Sohrab Ahmari kicked it off by denouncing National Review columnist David French for being nice and guileless, arguing that conservative Christians must fight the culture war with the aim of defeating the enemy and enjoying the spoils in the form of a public square reorder to the common good and ultimately the highest good. In other words, we should, drink the blood of our enemies and they shall lament, and all that sort of thing.
Huh.
And David French, who happens to be, although, I totally oppose most of his views, is like super nice. He's just a nice guy.
It's great.
Right?
Okay.
And so one of the attacks that Sohrab Ahmari had about David French is he was too nice. By the way, French is also an Iraq war veteran, and Sohrab Ahmari was questioning his courage.
Well...
Right? And French countered by advocating consistent and unyielding defense of civil liberties, including the civil liberties of your political opponents, arguing that upholding individual rights is both morally correct and the best long-term strategy to defend Christian interests. And as Nicholas Grossman from the outside is looking at this, and many of us on the outside are looking at this, says, what I find most striking about this debate is how all participants share the premise that American Christians faced an existential threat. They're arguing about strategy, how to counter the threat, whether the threat means backing Trump. The notion that social conservatives are a victimized minority who, if they're not careful, will soon be wiped out is taken as obviously true, and then walks through why it's, of course, not true, how they have considerable power right at this point. But the whole idea that they have to share space is driving some of them crazy. It's not that the liberal Hollywood society is demanding that their view of social issues be imposed on them. Rather, They're getting upset because they can't seem to impose their own social views on everybody else. And, he gives some nicely researched and gives some very nice examples of this. But anyway, he says the villains in the story of Christian victimhood are the left and the culture, terms that have enough meaning to unite conservatives while remaining ambiguous enough to accommodate a wide array of specifics. So this started with a tweet that Amari had. This is demonic. To hell with liberal order. Sometimes reactionary politics are the only salutary path. And what he explains is what prompted my ire was a Facebook ad for a children's drag queen reading hour at a public library in Sacramento.
Okay.
Right? It's called Drag Queen Story Hour, and it's voluntary, and it's not in a church, and nobody's making you go, but this is horrible. Right? Mari denounces this libertarian logic as weak, a recipe for defeat, and he picks on David French as the embodiment of all this represents. And he proposes instead a fiery culture war in pursuit of religious superiority, the ability to impose his belief on others.
Oh.
Right? And so that's what this is about.
Okay.
This is about scorched earth culture war and how anybody on our side who doesn't agree with us must be destroyed.
Okay. All right. Well,
now the thinking, the general concept behind that, I mean, take that back to Texas and trying to make sure that the voter suppression is to the point where it keeps Republicans in power.
Yes.
Okay. And so the whole idea is that if you feel like your tribe, whatever that is, in Amari's case, it's social conservatives. In Abbott's case, in Texas, Governor Abbott, it's Republicans. And in many other states, Republicans are feeling under pressure. There's the bathroom bills in the various and sundry states that was subject to the last election. If you feel like your tribe, if your side is under this existential threat, then like everything is justified.
Okay, I understand that mindset.
Yeah, that's the mindset. That's what we're talking about here.
Right, them.
And so a lot of conservatives disputed this call for illiberalism. David French, Bret Stephens, Charles C.W. Cook, who's at National Review. But nobody, or very few, as Nicholas Grossman points out, challenged the premise of conservative Christians encircled by hostile culture getting squeezed toward annihilation. And in fact, what it is a last-ditch fight against diversity. Now, I'm not going to argue whether you should take the diversity side or not. I'm obviously on the diversity side. That's an issue for them. But really, we're talking about the tactics here. And, basically, it's anything goes. And when you look at that mindset, it makes it easier to conceptualize how Laura Ingraham and Tucker Carlson and the White Power Hours that they have on Fox News justify what it is that they're doing. Sure. If this is true and the other side is so evil that they're trying to stamp you out, then you have to vote for us no matter how bad we get. And we know that. Yeah. And we're going to, do all sorts of stuff to make sure that those voters at least turn out. Typically, white supremacists don't vote. They don't want to be part of the political process. But the Republican Party and Fox News is doing their best to, and Trump in particular, are doing their best to bring them into the political process and make sure that they come out and vote. Now, the share of the population in the rural areas is declining, and the country itself is becoming more diverse. So eventually, this is not necessarily going to work. In fact, one of the people that recognizes this, of all people, is David Brooks, who has an article in the New York Times, The Coming GOP Apocalypse, Stumbling Blind into the Age of Diversity. Just a short paragraph from that. As Ronald Brownstein points out in The Atlantic, older Democrats prefer a more moderate candidate who they think can win. Younger Democrats prefer a more progressive candidate who they think can bring systemic change. But the generation gap is even more powerful when it comes to Republicans. To put it bluntly, young adults hate them. In 2018, voters under 30 supported Democratic House candidates over Republican ones by 67 to 32. A 2018 Pew survey found that 59% of millennial voters identify as Democrats or lean Democratic, and only 32% identify as Republicans or lean Republican. Now, to us, it's obvious as to why that is. Climate change is in the middle of that, but so is the idea of diversity. But the point is, if that's your mindset, if that's your point of view, that we're doomed unless we take these drastic steps, And since it's an existential issue, any steps that we take are justifiable. You get and understand why the Republican Party embraces the idea of asking citizenship questions on the census designed to realign things in a way that helps keep them in power. And in fact, in Nicholas Grossman's article, he has a really nice section on the paradox of Kavanaugh.
Uh-huh.
Okay. He says, the 2018 fight over Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation to the Supreme Court looms large in social conservative narratives of existential threat. For Amari, it's proof that they face enemies who seek our personal destruction. Rod Dreher says it radicalized him. French agrees it shows conservative Christians under threat, but argues Kavanaugh's confirmation demonstrates why the principles of classical liberalism, due process, presumption of innocence, etc., are the best response. As I said, Nicholas Grossman speaking, their debates primarily over strategy, not the threat's existence.
Mm-hmm.
But underlying all of these claims is a staggering presumption of bad faith. Amari, Dreher, French, and many other conservatives don't consider the possibility that at least some of the opposition to Kavanaugh might have been opposition to Kavanaugh, not to American Christians in general. And to get there, you have to assume Christine Blasey Ford was lying, deluded, put up to it, that people who said they believe her allegations of sexual assault are lying, that the women who poured their hearts out over their own sexual assaults were crisis actors, or at least manipulators exaggerating how they feel because of their secret anti-Christian agenda. And you also must dismiss concerns from Americans who think Kavanaugh's previous experience as a partisan operative isn't a good fit for the nation's high supposed impartial body. And you have to ignore Supreme Court confirmations of Neil Gorsuch, conservative and Catholic, Samuel Alito, conservative and Catholic, John Roberts, conservative and Catholic, none of whom faced accusations of sexual assault. You have to concoct a story where the left wasn't angry during Gorsuch's nomination in 2017, even though they were openly furious that the Senate blocked Merrick Garland, but developed such fury over the subsequent year that they decided to invent and pretend to care about accusations of sexual assault. The Kavanaugh case reveals the fuzziness of the distinction between cultural and political power. According to right-wing culture warriors, winning elections isn't a sign of lasting power, it's political, not cultural. But nearly losing but still winning a Supreme Court seat is a sign of cultural weakness so menacing that Christians must adapt a crisis mentality. All right? And if that's your mindset, and if that's the mindset of Gorsuch and Alito and everybody else, of course they're going to vote for keeping the citizenship question in the census when it comes to the Supreme Court, which it will.
Yeah. Like others have been observing.
That's why you should care about this fight.
Okay, it still feels like a long way from that, but it does. It all comes together in the end, I suppose. But everything has to be approached as a maximalist. I assume this burns them out at some point, but I guess they just keep replacing their ranks with new ones. But it's hard to keep up. As we know, it's hard to keep up that level of outrage. But if you have to make up the stories to boot, it seems like there's just not enough hours in the day.
Yeah, but then you need a network to help to make the stories
okay.
There, right? And so it all comes together, and it's all part of the same. We're all on the same team here. We're just trying to keep those people out of power, and whatever methods we do to do such are totally justified because it's an existential crisis. Without these extraordinary, unfair, ridiculous, over the top, however you want to cross the line, use your whatever analogy you want. If we don't do these things, we're going to lose, and that's just like totally unacceptable. So therefore, we have to do these things.
Yeah,
and it's just yet another example of how the parties are completely asymmetric. And so when you talk about the fact that Democrats don't approach this with the hardball ruthlessness that Republicans do when it comes to issues. It's true, but this is partly why. We happen to know we're winning the culture war, so we don't have that desperation.
I guess that's part of it. I guess even so, it doesn't even feel that much like a culture war so much as this is the direction the culture is heading in. But as a rearguard action of defense, I guess it feels like a war.
Right.
On the other side. Okay.
Okay, so you have to get into the mindset here. Now, I'm going to exaggerate. I'm going to use my friend Armando as a teaching example, as a thought experiment, even though this doesn't really hold. But bear with me here. Armando.
All right, I will. I don't know if he will.
Let's say Armando takes the extreme view.
Yes.
That anybody who doesn't support impeachment right now, yesterday,
What kind? All right.
Deserves the hardline scorched earth. You guys have no background, and you don't deserve to be in the cultural space, and you need to be stomped out approach.
All right.
And I'm one of the squishes like David French who said, no, we actually have to be polite to the other side, and I think it's a good idea, but, there's the strategy is the same. We should get rid of Trump, but the tactics are under debate. Is it better to do it with the election because it has a better chance of succeeding, or is it better to do it with impeachment because that has a better chance of succeeding? And if you take the hardline view of it's got nothing to do with whether it works or not, this is the right thing to do, and anybody who doesn't agree with us has to be stomped out, you start to get the flavor of the fighting that's going on the right. Now, it's not quite analogous because, again, we're asymmetric parties, and we don't take it to the mat like that and try to exterminate each other. We just don't. But you get the feeling that, if you go on, because there are people on our side who advocate taking the scorched earth policy. Why don't we just do it the way the Republicans do? They're ruthless, so we should be ruthless.
Okay.
And it just doesn't work. We're not the same. And the same feelings you have when you watch this from a distance and scratch your head and saying, look, if they want to destroy each other, that's fine, but I don't get why they're so passionate about it. It's the same idea that some of us have about, this is an existential issue and you have to go to the mat and do everything. And we're saying, well, it's just, it doesn't feel that way. It feels like we're winning and let's just continue this. And there you have, a little bit of the explanation between the sides about the timing of impeachment. Yeah,
I guess so. Although, I still think there's room with an issue like impeachment. Impeachment just sort of conjures, it's only brought up in existential context, so I suppose...
Well, we think it's a more serious issue than theirs, but obviously they think otherwise.
Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. A bit of news that's breaking from my perspective, having seen it during the break. So that's my definition of breaking news. As it came during the break, Daniel Dale, late of the, and I guess still now, currently at the moment at the Toronto Star, and the Star chronicler for the Star of Trump's enumerated lies, moving to CNN. He announces excitedly, I'm going to work for CNN. One of these days I'm going to have to do one of those tweets that says, a bit of personal news. It's Wednesday and I'm still here. Nothing's changing. He's going to work to CNN. He'll be on the Truth Beat full time, which is where I thought he was, starting June 17th, dissecting dishonesty from Trump, Democratic candidates, and others. So I guess that's the deal. They're going to move him to CNN. And in exchange, he gets the bigger platform, but in exchange, he has to both sides the lies. So,
well, I don't know if he's leaving,
think he's already doing that,
but he's going to join CNN. There's a lot of CNN contributors who also keep their day job. The bigger thing to me is that he has a bigger platform for this. Look, if you want to compare the lies that Democrats, say on the stump versus Trump's, I'm all in. Talk about asymmetry there.
By the way, this gives us a little peek behind the curtain of the business model of it here and the business decision-making here for Daniel. So he says, so he's moving over there, CNN's tweet welcoming there on the fact-checking beat. And I guess he's moving to it says, we're excited to welcome Daniel Dale to CNN's Washington Bureau, where he will
Oh.
join as a reporter on the fact-checking beat. So I think he's
So he
just
is moving.
switching jobs, like,
Yeah.
completely. Now, this is the interesting part. So here he's been doing this great job, and I don't know. I guess you could say Twitter helped make him a star in this. I mean, clearly it's his work that has made him a star. Twitter helped him distribute it. Just sort of a commentary on the journalism model out there. I don't study the stuff closely enough to really make a full analysis of it. But he goes on to say, for the last 3 years, I've done most of the fact-checking on my, quote, own time, weekends and nights, while trying to do my actual correspondent job during the day. Now the truth file will be my full-time focus. So, I started fact-checking
for somebody else.
Trump in September of 2016 because I was frustrated that much of the campaign coverage didn't seem very interested in talking about what was true and what was not true. So the whole reason for his taking this up, I guess what was so interesting to me was that this fact-checking Trump beat was what made him a star for the Toronto Star. And many people here in the U.S. started to take note of what the Toronto Star was doing, and Daniel Dale was the reason. And apparently at no point in all of this does the Toronto Star say, this is your great talent, this is your calling, this is what's garnering attention for you and the paper, this is where you should be spending your time, let's make that an official part of your job. And it took another competing news outlet to say, we'll pay him for this thing at which he's so stellar. And the other guys who were employing him are like, no, we lost him.
To be fair, one's Canadian, the other's American, so there is a bigger interest on the American side.
That is true.
And the other is we don't know if he chose a bigger salary over a competing offer or whether the Toronto Star just didn't make any offer at all and wanted him to cover courthouses.
Right. I mean, I'm sure they had hired him, of course, he was hired to follow Trump. He was the Washington correspondent for the Star. So, but he took this particular approach to it. And it's not clear that, I think actually it's clear the opposite. That
It's
the Toronto
clear that
Star
they
was
didn't want him
enjoying
to do it full time.
Yeah, but they were
He
clearly
had to do it weekends and evenings, he says.
Yeah, though they were clearly happy with his coverage.
So what
and
I would
that was
do
part
is
of it.
I would assign him to Steve King first off, right?
I guess.
Steve King says it was a political lynch mob that kicked them off the committees, and that the decision ought to be reversed.
Oh, I thought he liked lynch mobs.
I'm surprised he didn't just say it was a high-tech lynching.
Yeah, well, he doesn't know about high tech. All right, well, some lynchings you win and some you lose, I guess.
That's how it goes. So anyway, there's the background for a lot of this stuff that's going on today, and it's interesting to look at it through that lens because you get a different perspective of things. Let's talk impeachment then.
Okay. What a high-tech lynching that's going to be.
There's pro-impeachment, anti-impeachment. Which argument do you want?
I don't know. Anti-impeachment, I'll pretend I want to hear.
Let's cover that for a little bit. We covered plenty of pro-impeachment.
Actual anti-impeachment?
And there's good reasons for that.
Okay.
Here's Charlie Cook. Why House Democrats shouldn't impeach the president. It would likely hinder their ability to remove him from office, not speed it up. Public opinion on this issue is pretty straightforward. Most people disapprove of the job that Trump has done, which nearly every major poll has shown for the entirety of his presidency. But with only 17 months to go before the next election, the public doesn't want to remove him from office through impeachment. That's assuming the public knows what impeachment is. A process as opposed to, like, if you impeach somebody, then they're out. That's not how it works. Right. A May 28-31 CNN national poll of adults showed 41% favoring impeachment and removal from office, 54% opposing, which were better numbers for the pro-impeachment side than most other polls. Some seem to ignore the all-consuming nature of the impeachment process. So he's talk a little bit about process, so I think it's a good point to make at least. Even if they think it's unlikely to undermine their chances of beating Trump in November, perhaps these advocates should at least consider the possibility it gives him the foil he needs for the battle. Why do they persist? The answer, of course, is that many Democrats and liberals despise Trump so thoroughly that it has clouded their judgment, just as a similar hatred among Republicans and conservatives toward Bill Clinton affected theirs 20 years ago. No. Emotion and logic are not two things that typically go hand in hand. The House Democrats who have come out in favor of impeachment reflect the base of the party, but not many rank-and-file members, and certainly not those freshmen who gave them the majority, have done the same. So that's Charlie Cook's point of view. The sentiment just isn't there within the moderate faction of the party, which is half of the party, he says.
Right.
I would argue, actually, it's a lot to do with age. For example,
possibly.
this new CNN poll comes out looking at the Democratic primary: Biden 32, Sanders 18, Harris 8, Warren 7, Buttigieg 5, O'Rourke 5, Booker 3, Castro 2, everybody else low. Age of voter has a lot to do with things I wrote this morning. If younger voters outnumber older voters, it would be a different country, but older voters vote with regularity. So if it doesn't go my way, I'm not voting, loses every single time, and so does only the White House matters. It's the Supreme Court, stupid. Just ask Armando. We're getting there, but not at the pace everybody's happy with, I said. Here's Josh Marshall, again, against impeachment. I continue to believe more strongly than you can imagine that impeaching President Trump is silly and a waste of time. That's not because I think the politics are bad, as people always seem to assume when you say that. I simply think it doesn't accomplish anything. So it really doesn't matter what the politics are. The only real question to me is whether Democrats succeed in their real shot at ending Trump's presidency, which is November 2020. It's an existential challenge for the whole country. You get that existential stuff?
Yeah, I know. Everyone loves existentialism all of a sudden.
Right. Justifies your hard and fast position. But here's the thing. You need to bring people along if you think your strategy is the right one. And we here have to admit there's been a real shortfall. This started to click for me in early May, says Josh Marshall, when there was the first signs Robert Mueller or his handlers at DOJ were resisting his testifying. I don't know what Nadler's attitude was, but as it showed up in the news write-ups, it was basically we couldn't agree on ground rules. Oh, well, sad trombone. That doesn't cut it. If the most aggressive stance toward President Trump isn't impeachment but aggressive investigation, which I firmly believe, then you actually have to be aggressive and show you're being aggressive. So he's critical of the Democrats are not being more aggressive on their alternative strategy that they seem to have, which is to, okay, you don't want to call it impeachment, do impeachment, but don't call it impeachment. Be aggressive about it.
Well, they're all listening to Josh.
Right. Now, here's Joe Lawrence on the other side. 6 ways Democrats can ease America into thinking about impeachment and Donald Trump. Democrats can't let Trump run out the impeachment clock as he laughs all the way to the bank in the polls. Start preparing the public. Start by inviting John Dean, she says. Well, guess what? John Dean was just invited. President Richard Nixon's White House counsel, who famously told Nixon, have Woodstein testify.
Oh, yeah.
Start showing all the presidents, man, on every channel. Do stuff to prepare the public.
To prepare boomers.
Have Watergate veterans out there talking about what impeachment was really like, why they did it, and such and so forth. And that's part of the way that you prepare the public. Other things that you can do, historians, so the Andrew Johnson presidency should be on testifying, participants in the Clinton impeachment process, scholars who study impeachment, former federal prosecutors. Well, we have plenty of those on the cable networks. And James Comey, just him speaking at a public hearing on the origins of the FBI's counterintelligence investigation. And, of course, you could have Mueller, too. So the idea is, look, if people want to see Trump impeached, then prepare the ground better. If you think that, as Charlie Cook accurately points out, sentiment isn't there for impeachment, then you got to do a better job of making the sentiment there for impeachment. And one example of this is a couple of polls we'll talk about today. Let's just go through these quickly. Emerson polling, North Carolina, general election head-to-heads, Trump 44, Biden 56. This is North Carolina. Okay. Trump 46, Sanders 54, Trump 48, Buttigieg 52, Trump 50, Warren 50, Trump 51, Harris 49. These are not good numbers for Trump for North Carolina. And in Michigan, here we go. Biden 53, Trump 41, Sanders 53, Trump 41, Buttigieg 47, Trump 41, Warren 47, Trump 43, Harris 47, Trump 44. So 3 years after he became the first Republican to win the state since 1988, fewer than 36% of Michigan voters said they would vote to reelect Trump, compared to more than 51% who said they plan to vote for somebody else. Those are not good numbers for him. At the same time, in that sample that they were looking for, most people, the poll shows Michigan voters are split on whether Trump obstructed Robert Mueller's probe, but Michigan voters oppose calls for Congress to bring impeachment hearings 53-40. That's the dilemma that Democrats are wrestling with. and Michigan encapsulates that. Trump is losing, but the voters there don't want impeachment hearings.
Yes. You know what? I guess maybe now it's time to start moving to. All right. So my follow-up question, I guess, if they answer, I will oppose impeachment. Say, how likely is an impeachment that goes ahead anyway to change your vote in November? Like, for instance, if you were saying, I favor a Democrat.
Or do you think that you're talking about the voters?
Yeah.
Or are you talking about the House members?
I'm talking about the voters, actually. Okay. How do you feel about impeachment? I oppose impeachment. How do you feel about, we're going to vote for a Democrat for president or a Democrat for House of Representatives in November?
I mean, some follow-up questions about how firmly do you feel this, or whether you can change your mind, or are you persuaded? Just like you would do, are you undecided, all that sort of stuff.
Sure, all of that. And
don't just give me a binary. Give me some choices here.
Yeah, you tell me you're going to vote for a Democrat, but you are part of the 50-something% that oppose impeachment. Say, okay, so supposing they go ahead and impeach him or start an impeachment inquiry.
And here's where the famous focus groups
do you vote Republican
really come
now?
in handy. Have a bunch of people who oppose Trump but also oppose impeachment, and sit them down in a focus group and explain, what are you thinking?
Yeah, and what is it that would are you? I would love to know. I'd love to see. Can you identify for me a person who says, "Oh my God, Trump is the worst. We got to get rid of him. I'm voting for a Democrat in every office I can."
Without question, I'll crawl through grass, but I don't want to see him impeached.
Yeah,
explain that.
If you are going to impeach him, I'm going to vote for a Republican to teach you a lesson. Because I mean, if the calculation that the Cooks of the world and Josh Marshalls and others of the world are saying, well, it's a looming disaster for Democrats, it's going to make things harder. Is it, or is it just that you're saying, well, people say they impose impeachment, and so therefore that will be reflected in their votes? I think it might not be.
Josh Marshall goes out of his way to say it's not the politics of that. I don't think anybody knows what the politics are. The question is, from a practical point of view, are you helping to ease him out of office, or are you not?
That's a very practical formulation of a question that I don't believe anyone is asking themselves in the voting booth. Terrific. Right. That's a great theory, and it doesn't work.
You have to ask the voters. But in terms of the pundits, that's what Marshall's saying.
Well, Josh Marshall wrote that script in 2007.
The politics are terrible.
Yeah. He pulled out his "I oppose impeachment of George W. Bush" thing and changed the names and put it up there. The thinking hasn't evolved at all. I don't know if everyone remembers that he did that, but you can go and look up his impeachment's a waste of time stories.
Who don't think that impeachment hearings are a great idea in Washington. Charlie Cook's another one.
Yeah. And despite the circumstances having changed, or the names having changed. Yeah. Right. I mean, I'm a little tired of, I've always been a little tired of Josh Marshall glibly rolling the dice on what he thinks is the politics of something because reasons, and it has not borne itself out very often for Josh.
Mm. So here's conservative-leaning Josh Kraushaar writing in the National Journal today. Trump faces a rocky road to 270. New polling coupled with last year's midterm results underscores how challenging it will be for Trump to recreate his winning 2016 coalition. He covers Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, Nevada, Michigan, New Mexico. And, there's no way that he's going to wind up recreating 2016 in that regard. I underscore and emphasize that because the thing that drives me nuts isn't impeachment. I totally understand why impeachment is a difficult thing to decide. I get that. What I don't get are pundits who keep saying, nonetheless, the economic models that showed that Trump was going to get 57% of the vote in 2016 clearly show Trump is the favorite for 2020. Mm-hmm. Yeah. He's not the favorite. He faces a rocky road to 270. Even the conservative pundits see that. Even their own campaign notes that they're trailing in these states. So forget the models. The models are wrong. They were wrong in 2016. The polls were right. They got the popular vote exactly right. It's tougher to do the Electoral College, but then again, we had Russians and Comey interfering with that as well. Not meddling, interfering. But the fact of the matter is that Trump is not the favorite for 2020, and that being the case, especially if we have an economic downturn, then that figures into your political calculations about impeachment. And if people say, well, to hell with the politics, you should just do it right, what's right? that sometimes loses. So I understand the dilemma.
Yeah, it's
I'm
sometimes
still pro
does.
impeachment, but I understand the dilemma.
Everyone
I'm more
understands the dilemma.
David French than I am that other guy who thinks
I
that
see.
everybody else is bad to be nice.
All right. Well, I mean, if it's practicality and realpolitik that you're after, I suppose you could always put it this way. Josh Marshall or Harry Reid?
Right. And Harry Reid, what does he know about politics?
Yeah. I mean, win an election or something. Geez, don't you see Josh Marshall scowling at you over the top of his glasses? Come on.
The interesting thing, though, is that Harry Reid has, in fact, changed his mind.
Yes.
As and
he did about,
that goes along with my thesis that impeachment is a tide.
Okay. Yes.
It goes and it has its own pace, and people are going to come to different conclusions. It's like trying to decide who you're going to vote for from president if you haven't decided yet, or that's not a good analogy. Better yet, deciding who you're going to vote for in the Democratic primary if you haven't decided yet.
That one.
Some people are going to decide early.
I thought you meant
but
that.
A lot of people are going to, decide later, and as you go along, you have less and less and less undecideds.
Yes.
With time, and you can't hurry that. Same thing with impeachment.
And love.
People will come to their own conclusions. Some people are smart, like Armando, and they get there soon.
Yes.
Right? And some people are less smart, and they get there later.
Right.
So long as they get there, it doesn't matter.
I guess so. I guess there's also the larger narrative of how many times do you pundits get to be wrong and late to the story and still get to be pundits? We'll see.
Well, nobody likes the Iraq War anymore.
Right.
No, everybody was wrong back,
right.
2003.
But we're exactly. But to what end?
Except
I mean,
us.
where have we gotten here? With the people who said, yeah, maybe it's a good one. We should do this one. Also, here's my advice on impeachment. Oh, I should listen carefully.
Yeah,
No,
while we're at it, why don't we have a blogger ethics conference?
Yes, right. Why not? Stupid bloggers. We got everything wrong over and over again.
They should really look at themselves in the mirror and decide this stuff, right?
Yes.
Anyway, but, life is complicated. Politics is complicated. Impeachment has its own rhythms. Nancy Pelosi doesn't want to do impeachment, but she may be forced to do impeachment. And we'll see.
Okay.
The greatest aid to the impeachment argument, of course, is Donald Trump. So as long as he keeps doing things and he's, doesn't want Hope Hicks to testify or turn over documents that I don't even know why she has, or other aides, the more obstruction and stonewalling he does, then you go that route. But I sort of agree with Donnie Deutsch in the sense that, and I've said this before he said it, don't call it impeachment. Just do the hearings. Start the process. Be more aggressive. Yeah. And then see where you're at. And then, if it turns out that you can only get stuff if you do impeachment, as Armando says, then do impeachment. But, you can start. You can just start.
Yeah. I mean, there's certainly plenty of room to be more aggressive now, even if for whatever reason you've decided that, no, if I use the I word, it all falls apart. There's still a lot more you could be doing a lot faster.
All right. This last piece is from Rob Goodman, a political theorist at Ryerson University and former Democratic congressional speechwriter. Okay. What Elizabeth Warren gets wrong about impeachment. And again, it's going to encapsulate the real politics part of this is in Politico today.
Okay.
Even if you believe Trump is a national emergency, a dangerously unchecked president chipping away at democracy every week he's in office, that doesn't make impeachment the right move. The evidence from both our own politics and from other countries with Trumpian leaders suggests impeachment can be morally right, legally justified, and still politically irresponsible. The pro-impeachment wing of the Democratic Party is focused on the first two considerations at the expense of the third. The idea of treating impeachment as a duty and by extension deliberately ignoring its politics might be morally satisfying, but it's dangerous for Democrats and for the nation. Americans who see Trump as a national emergency, and there are many, have two real goals: increasing the chances of removing Trump from office in the short term and strengthening the rule of law in the long term. Impeachment proceedings would set back the first goal and aren't likely to advance the second. So no matter how morally satisfying the action may be, if it increases the chance of Trump remaining in office, it's reckless. Now, you have to make the determination that it increases the chances. I don't see that.
Right.
Does it decrease the chances? It may not, but I don't see how it increases the chances.
No.
Because what you're going to do is you're going to explain to the public, like John Dean did, what you learn in ways that are compelling that people will watch. And even Fox News will be forced to cover impeachment hearings, for example.
Yeah. as we discussed yesterday with Armando, the biggest bump in impeachment support came from Mueller coming out and, giving everybody a package of dry crackers. I'm not going to say any more. It speaks for itself. And A, huge bump in the awareness, and then B, just watching people say the Mueller report said he did something wrong. I heard that it exonerated him.
This guy, the speechwriter, thinks that focusing on Trump instead of student loan forgiveness, firing a James Comey instead of protecting and building on Obamacare, essentially focusing on Elizabeth Warren's policies rather than Trump, is a better way to go. And that's what happened in 2018. The Democrats ran and won on policy. So I don't know. I don't think that impeachment makes Donald Trump more likely to be elected. It certainly would take the focus away from the policies that the Democratic candidates are pushing.
I guess
it would, because impeachment is much more interesting than policy.
That part I don't dispute. I guess I'm like, I don't know what kind of, I don't know how much credence I put in the idea of, it was the policies that won. I think it was just as much, we need to have a Democratic House if you're going to have any hope of holding this guy accountable.
Trump was on the ballot,
also
whether he
some
was
nice
there
policies.
or not. That's what won the election.
Right.
So the answer to that one, I think, is pretty easy.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, you're worried that Elizabeth Warren's policies aren't going to be looked at, or Julian Castro's, or Beto O'Rourke's, or Kamala Harris's excellent policy. You're worried that those aren't going to be looked at? Why don't we hear from the candidates? If they're up there on stage talking about impeachment, guess what we're going to be talking about?
I think she's put an awful lot of work into her policies. She must have given some consideration to whether or not people were going to pay attention to them.
Exactly. And if she still thinks impeachment is something that we need to talk about,
he was
maybe
a
that's telling you
congressional
something right there.
Yeah, I think so. Also, by the way, I thought that was a weird...
By the way, she has a plan for that.
Oh, well, yeah, that's right. I have a plan for those of you who say I need to stick to my plan.
Well, you're worried about impeachment? I have a plan for that, too.
Yeah. And, of course,
And you know what that plan is? Impeach him.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good plan. Because also there's the problem of, no plan works unless, like majority rules and there's a democracy.
Right.
So that's a big thing. I thought it was weird that at the beginning of his justification, he threw in there, I don't know how this got in there. The evidence from both our own politics and from other countries with Trumpian leaders suggests that this thing that is kind of unique to our country and in our chartering constitution won't work in some way with these other countries. What? Why?
So I'll end it here. But let me just read you the last paragraph of the speechwriter's case against impeachment. It's kind of interesting, and at least worth thinking about, even if you reject it, or even when you reject it. The case against the impeachment of President Trump is based on moral compromise, uncertainty, and calculated deference to experts.
Yeah.
Case against impeachment, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't fit on a bumper sticker. But the easy case for impeachment, it's the right thing, it's obvious, expert judgment is irrelevant, tell the politicians to stop playing games and get on with it, is scarily reminiscent of the case for Trump. This is the antithesis of both, not least because it's about helping people accept that politics can't and should not always be morally satisfying. In his own way, saying, you know what, Democrats need to be more ruthless, just like Republicans are. And of course, again, we're asymmetric parties, and I don't think that works.
Yeah. Well, I have a long list of what the center tells me politics ain't. So far, it ain't beanbag, and it ain't morally satisfying, and I don't know what else it is. But to the extent that it's plans and policy, now that's governance. Politics is what? The art of getting, into position to make that policy. Yeah. But just standing there with
the art
a long,
of the possible,
yeah,
is it not?
I got to tell you, the long list of policies, it did not work. Oh, well, in 2018, they took back the House, and very many moderates never mentioned it. Yeah, all right, but we're here impeaching who? Not the Congress. It's the president. How did he get there? It was a complete clown show versus here's all these look at all these policies. I'm ready for policy.
Well,
how did that work?
Let me leave you with this, going back to the CNN poll. 2020 Democratic primary by age. Voters under 45, Sanders 26, Biden 19, Harris 9, Warren 7. Voters over 45, Biden 45, Sanders 10, Warren 8, Harris 7.
I'm not sure what that, I don't know.
Okay. What is it?
I don't know.
The voters over 45 are the ones who show up and vote. The reason Biden is leading is because he's leading in that age cohort, as well as people of color. Okay? That's the constituency that's going to win you the Democratic primary. That's the constituency you have to persuade about impeachment as well, I would argue.
Yeah, that's probably true.
We're not looking at impeachment in terms of age, but we should, because that's really, I think, where that breakdown's going to come.
Yeah. Maybe you need to take advantage of the fact that you still have so many boomers lingering and do the Watergate's greatest hits tour as you were discussing earlier. I mean, maybe that's what works with them. I don't know.
Well, that's really part of the point. You know, who is John Dean? Said the 31-year-old reporter.
Yeah.
Well,
right,
how about
voter.
getting those guys up there so that the over 45s who turn out in great numbers in the
Right.
polls in voting, and convince them? And how do you
that's
do
an
that
idea.
with people like John Dean? So I think that's a great idea. I think Joe Lawrence was right on that.
Sure. We could do it at Woodstock.
Well, if you want, or you can do it at Tanglewood. It doesn't really matter.
Okay. Well, all right. Oh, it's still a loud alarm going. All right. Thanks very much. I'm assuming you're finally running here. Although, if you want to do a second hour of the show, I have no objection. I'm a little tired.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about that. No,
Okay.
I got things to do, but
All right.
but in the meantime,
Thank you.
that's what's going on, and hopefully I was able to get some of that existential mindset into your mind there.
Yes.
Because it does explain a lot about the hardened positions that people take and the scorched earth policies. I'm opposed to it, but I just thought you should be aware.
I think it finally did sink. It took a while to catch on to exactly what was going on with that, but it was time well spent. That's what we have this 2-hour show for. So thank you very much for sticking with it and convincing us.
And I'll see you tomorrow.
All right, that'll be very good. We'll do that. And thanks again. It sounds like we went off the air a little bit, but we are back on, so everyone can catch all the wisdom they might have missed in the podcast. Thanks very much, Greg. I'll be back in a minute from now to figure out what we're going to do next. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Man, I don't know. An awful lot happening in the last couple of seconds here as I'm trying to scramble around for new stories to build off of what we've done in the first hour. And let's see. I grabbed this one. This is a departure from where I thought I was going. But I guess we'll connect it back to Daniel Dale, now moving over to CNN. And I think, just reading his tweet stream about it, it's not all that long, and it's not exactly, not entirely worth reporting as news, but he did make a mention of that, one, CNN saying that he was going to be on the fact-checking beat, and let's see, how does he, was it him that put it this way? There was something about, I guess, being on the fact-checking beat that made me think that maybe he would be working with Andrew Kaczynski, who also made the big move over to CNN on a fact-checking beat, but a little more on the online Google guru digging up the past fact-checking beat, as opposed to up to the minute as he lies fact-checking beat that Daniel Dale was doing. What was it that made me think that? Join as maybe it was the CNN's tweet. He would join as a reporter on the fact-checking beat. And, I don't remember what actually sent me to, or gave me the thought that he might be working with Kaczynski. But what's Kaczynski up to? This morning, he's tweeting around a new storyline he's following. Says it this way. New story. We identified 5 instances where Donald Trump planted stories or spread fake claims, a long time ago, about, in particular, the British royal family, whose guests he is while he's visiting there, although if they're on their way to The Hague, maybe not. Spreading fake claims about the British royal family joining his properties, specifically Mar-a-Lago, in order to get publicity. So it's illustrated here with a screenshot of an old New York Post cover. that has the screamer headline, Princess of New York, Diana, set to buy a $3.5 million apartment in Trump Tower. So when he said joining his properties, I was thinking of Mar-a-Lago. That comes up later on in the thread, but I guess buying a condo in Trump Tower, that's kind of a weird way of expressing it, joining his properties. But I see where you're going with that. So let's see. There's a CNN story that accompanies it. We might as well take a look at the full story, or should we just go through? Well, how long is the story? Should I just go through his tweet thread, or should I read through the full story? Although actually, it looks like the tweet thread is about as long as the story itself. So maybe I'll just read the tweet thread. In the examples, Trump would serve as an anonymous source. And I wonder, is this back when he was pretending to be a different person, right? I'm John Barron. You don't recognize my voice. It's completely different. In the examples, Trump would serve as an anonymous source, claiming Princess Diana or Prince Charles were joining his properties. New York tabloids would print. Wire services would aggregate, generating the fake news stories world and nationwide. So here's the Princess of New York Post story, juxtaposed with, I don't know what this is a screen grab from, but maybe something else here. And then, I don't know, some other newspaper, a broadsheet. Buckingham Palace called the report absolute rubbish. The princess has no intention of buying any property in America or of moving to America, the palace spokesman said. But the point is, it gets stories generated around the world with his name in it, even if they're being denied. In one instance, the next tweet reads, a Buckingham Palace spokesperson said the story was concocted by Mr. Trump to secure publicity for his club. There was the Mar-a-Lago thing. It is a matter of regret that he feels he can use the names of the members of the royal family to do so. It's almost as if they have forgotten that in inviting him to have a state visit in the UK. I mean, I am sure there's also part of him that says we have to get over the personal grudges. He's the president of the United States. I mean, I don't really feel that he is, but you know, the royal family doesn't have to be concerned with what I think here. But they had a pretty good excuse to say, I mean, is it really so bad for relations if the president of the United States doesn't get invited to the UK on a state visit? I mean, on the other hand, maybe like 3-4 hands here, they might have had that discussion and said, yeah, well, let's skip it because who cares? I mean, really, is it really a big deal if the president isn't invited here? And somebody else might have said, well, Donald Trump, being who he is, I mean, it really could have a pretty serious impact on the U.S.-UK relationship if we snub him. He's the kind of person that ordinarily is kept from serving in office in the United States as president anyway, by the seriousness of this, you know, the gravity of the situation. You wouldn't dare impact the nature of the relationship or damage the relationship over a petty personal grievance. But Donald Trump would. So I guess, you know, in normal times you would say, really, does it matter if the U.S. president is invited to a state visit or not? No. He may be insulted. He may take it personally. But he will not go out of his way to do things that will be obvious and troublesome and get him called out as a petty tyrant to punish us. Whereas this president will, and he will be called out that way, but his base will love him for it. So they may have said, you know, we're better off allowing him this wish of a state visit, despite the fact that he's personally insulted our family many times. So there he is. Let's see. The next tweet here says, in another instance, Trump falsely said on the Howard Stern show in 1993 that Princess Diana was looking for an apartment in Trump Tower. I guess a second or maybe a third or rather. I don't know how many rounds he's had with this one. He then said how hot he found her and how he'd like to date her to become King of England. I knew he had some ambitions. I was actually joking yesterday when Maggie Haberman was reporting that he went into Buckingham Palace, or he met with Theresa May, I guess, and commented later on the the thousands of people he saw in the street cheering for him, despite the fact that the reporters covering him were riding along and saw that there was, in most instances, no one on the street whatsoever, and that where there were thousands gathered, they were gathered in protest, and that it was fairly obvious that they were gathered there in protest because they were doing so under a gigantic baby Trump in a diaper balloon. But he insisted the exact opposite. And then everybody, of course, got, I think rightfully still, we're all rightfully annoyed that they report things like, well, you know, he said that he saw thousands of people cheering for him, but we all have questions. You know, why don't you just say, nah, he's mentally ill. He's just making crap up. He's too delicate mentally to admit what he really saw. Well, all the rest of us saw. He's lying to our faces, and everybody can see right through it. But they never have time or room for that somehow. Anyway, I was just wondering, it was so unhinged from reality and so delusional. I wondered, you know, what would it take to get the press to cover this visit as some sort of an abnormality? Could he walk up to the Queen and snatch a crown off her head and put it on his own head and say, I'm the King of England now. You all bow down to me. And would everybody say, that Trump, what an odd sense of humor he's got. Or, he's certainly a maverick. He's thrown out the rule book on diplomacy. You know, you just get the sense that he would generate headlines like that instead. But as it turns out, at least in 1993, when he's sitting around with Howard Stern, he thought, if I took my pants down near Princess Diana, she would be unable to resist, and then I'd be King of England, which is not how any of it works, but, well, you know how. We have the sound effect for that.
That is not how this works!
Right, see? I could have told you that, and I would have done so much more calmly than that. So, yeah, there you go. On Howard Stern, he says, Princess Diana is looking for an apartment in Trump Tower, and this is going to somehow lead to his becoming King of England. Screen grab from the story accompanies that one. And in yet another instance, in the next tweet here, Trump and Mar-a-Lago claim Princess Diana and Prince Charles paid to join. They paid to join the club. That's what I was thinking of when he was saying join his properties. Outlets like the New York Times, are they good? Have you heard of them? And the Associated Press write the claim. Buckingham Palace denies forcefully. New York Times forced to run a correction. And, but, you know, again, for Trump, it doesn't matter. He's not embarrassed by the fact that everyone, well, again, not everybody comes away with like, oh my God, Trump is such a liar. Half the country comes away with that, or I guess half of New York comes away with that. The rest of the country doesn't even notice, but another half of them just say, that Trump, you know, he just loves a big story. And for Trump himself, he's like, my name is in the paper. The name of my property is in the paper. Sure, Buckingham Palace is going to deny it. They deny things all the time. But sometimes denial helps boost the rumor. So he's happy with the outcome no matter what. I feel like, is there anything else or maybe some nuance to it that we could get out of the actual article? President Donald Trump was all smiles on Monday as he attended a state dinner at Buckingham Palace hosted by Queen Elizabeth II. Thank you for reminding us that she's the second. But the royal family has for years battled back stories that its members were looking into or joining Trump's properties. Stories that, according to multiple biographies of Trump, were spread by the real estate developer himself. Interestingly, is there no rumor in here ever that Prince Andrew was ever going to join one of his properties? That would have been the more believable of the claims, given that apparently one of the allegations against Jeffrey Epstein is that those two hung together and that he provided for the prince's entertainment from out of his little black book of teenagers. Between 1981 and 1995, multiple claims that members of the British royal family were joining Trump properties filled New York tabloids and national papers, according to a CNN K-File review of archival papers, audio, and books about the then real estate developer. All of them were unequivocally shot down by Buckingham Palace. One such instance in the lead up to the Trump Towers February 1983 opening, when a persistent rumor kept appearing that Prince Charles and his then new wife Diana were looking at buying an apartment in the building. The claim generated significant publicity for Trump Tower, which the then 36-year-old real estate developer Trump hoped would be his signature building. But it wasn't true, and the source of the misinformation, according to 4 biographies, was Trump himself. That seems weird. The 1981, 82, and 83 all had reports beginning in New York tabloids, but then quickly made their way to outlets like the Associated Press and the Boston Globe. Quote, Prince Charles and his new bride are planning to buy a $5 million, 21-room apartment in a building under construction here, the New York Post said today. The Associated Press wrote. Buckingham Palace aides met with Donald Trump, developer of the Trump Tower on 5th Avenue at 57th Street, during the prince's visit to New York last June, the Post said. It quoted unidentified sources as saying that a deal was on. That's the quote. The Associated Press would later put out a story in which Buckingham Palace said there was, quote, no truth to the original report. In his 1987 book, The Art of the Deal, Trump would write, the rumor that helped promote Trump Tower more than any other press story about a celebrity, but that was it, I guess, that rumor helped more than any other. But he never said he was the source of the claim. He wrote that he received an unsolicited call from a reporter and claimed he refused to confirm or deny the claim. So he's lying about the lie itself as well. And by the way, so if you're thinking, oh, gee whiz, did he really obstruct justice? Duh. Welcome. Our policy, he says, was not to comment about sales, and that's what I told this reporter. But as he said, just the last paragraph, right? He says, the rumor that helped promote Trump Tower more than any of that's the problem here is that there's bad syntax in the story. That's what it is. It literally says the rumor that helped promote Trump Tower more than any of other press story about a celebrity. But I guess what we're trying to say here is more than any other rumor about celebrities buying Trump Tower properties, this one helped the most. But then in the next paragraph, he's trying to get away with saying, oh, our policy is not to comment about sales. That's all you do is comment about sales. That's how you make your sales. Lying about the lying and the lying. All right. So apparently the reporter then decided to call Buckingham Palace. By this time, the royal couple had left for their honeymoon and they were out on the yacht Britannia. So the Buckingham Palace spokesman said just what I had. They couldn't confirm or deny the rumor. That was all the media needed. In the absence of a denial, the story that the royal couple was considering buying an apartment in Trump Tower became front-page news all over the world. It certainly didn't hurt us, but I had to laugh to myself. So now he's laughing about the lying about the lying. But don't impeach him because reasons. Trump's name would be linked to the British royal family again in September of 1992 when, as Trump attempted to rebuild his struggling financial empire, the New York Post cover story cited as rumor that it was, quote, maybe started by the Trump Organization, unquote, that Princess Diana was looking to build a $5 million property in Trump Tower, like I guess buy a couple units and redo them. The original claim that prompted the article, according to The Lost Tycoon, a 1993 biography of Trump, began with Trump leaking word of the alleged deal to the New York Post Cindy Adams. The Trump Organization, according to the New York Post, said 2 inquiries were made about the apartment for Princess Diana. Understanding celebrity culture, Trump made outlandish claims about the beautiful women who pursued him and the celebrities who wanted to buy whatever he sold, said Michael D'Antonio, the author of The Truth About Trump and a CNN contributor. These tidbits were generally throwaway entertainments, but could, when picked up by the wire services or more legitimate press, become real reports printed around the world under the banner of a credible source like the Associated Press. I mean, the man is the original fake news, and of course, a lot of nerve it takes to go around accusing everybody else of being fake news. But that's not new in itself. Trump himself told the New York Post one inquiry came from a, quote, very aristocratic, unquote, guy with an English accent who works at a corporation based in London and handles all the royals' real estate transactions. which is probably not an existent person. He later claimed to have seen the plans himself, like the people dancing in Jersey City. They were sent to me because I have to approve the structural changes, he said, launching into details of the apartment interiors. Buckingham Palace denied the claims to the New York Post, and no apartment was ever purchased. Doesn't really sound like a reasonable thing for the British royal couple to do, but okay. That didn't stop Trump. A year later, during an appearance on the Howard Stern Show in November of 1993, Trump was asked if it was true that Princess Diana was looking at an apartment in Trump Tower. That's true, Trump said. Does that mean she contacted you? Asked Stern. I hope she's looking at... She is really hot. Oh my God, this guy. I hope she's looking at... She's really hot. But then, guess what comes next? She has gained 20 to 25 pounds. She looks great, Trump said, saying he'd love to date the princess. There could be a love interest. I'd become King of England. King of England. I'd have to leave. I'd have to lose the New York accent quickly. See, they wouldn't like my accent over there. And he's right, they don't. But mostly, Trump said, he wanted Princess Diana to come to a party at Mar-a-Lago. We're going to try to get Lady Di, Trump said. We're trying to get Lady Di actually to come to the party. It's a part of the deal for buying the apartment in Trump Tower. She can't have the apartment in Trump Tower unless she comes to the party. Yeah, so here you go. This is his idea of a sense of humor, I think. A year later, in October 1994, another New York Post story, this time on the entire front page, claimed Princess Diana was set to buy a $3.5 million apartment in Trump Tower. Princess of New York, that's the one I told you about, with a full-page cover, the full-page cover read with a photo of Diana. The Post cited a source, quote, close to the deal, I wonder who that was, who claimed Diana viewed floor plans and spoke with Donald Trump, and claimed British composer Andrew Lloyd Webber was instrumental, get it, in steering Diana toward the apartment. A spokeswoman for Andrew Lloyd Webber told CNN on Monday the report was fiction. Andrew Lloyd Webber did not steer Princess Diana toward an apartment in Trump Tower. They were not well acquainted. Bill Hoffman, who was a longtime reporter for Page 6 in the New York Post and who authored the story, said he couldn't recall if Trump was the source. He was. I can't recall if it was him or someone in his organization. It was him. Hoffman told CNN in a phone interview, Trump spoke to me a lot off the record, or a source close to Trump. It could have been him. I would call him for scoops, things that would have benefited him. Oh, I'm sorry. He would call up for scoops, things that would benefited him. This thing is full of typos, and it's really screwing me up. Okay. The story generated rewrites in hundreds of newspapers across the country when it was picked up by wire services. Buckingham Palace shot down the report. This report is highly speculative rubbish. It is simply not true, spokesperson told The Guardian. The princess is not set to buy an apartment in the United States or anywhere else and has no plans to live anywhere but in Britain. A spokesman added, the princess has no intention of buying any property in America or of moving to America. 2 months later, in December of 1994, claims again circulated, this time ahead of the launch of Trump's Mar-a-Lago club, claiming Princess Diana and Prince Charles had joined the club. Sure. Catherine Merlin, the membership director of Mar-a-Lago, told the Palm Beach Post that the royal couple had each filed applications to join the club and paid the $50,000 initiation fee. Merlin claimed to have handled the applications for other celebrities, but not the royals. That Mr. Trump handled, she said. And you can imagine Mr. Trump saying, gee, I don't know, what do you think? Are they good for it? Should we allow them into the... I'll review your application. Charles and Di join, but separately. A headline, and again, a typo, and a headline of Associated Press story read. The headline of an Associated story. Oh my gosh. Nobody copy edited this at all. Well, that's what the headline said. And the claim once again generated nationwide publicity for Trump. The New York Times also reported the claim, saying each had paid the fee. Joining separately. How interesting is that? I handled the application myself, the Times quoted Trump as saying. More than 250 memberships have been sold even before the start of the campaign. Trump boasted he was excited about the pair joining. I think it's different for obvious reasons. We have a lot of incredible celebrities, but this is just different, Trump said, according to the Palm Beach Post. Buckingham Palace, again, quickly shot down the claim. It's complete nonsense, a spokesperson said. They have not joined the club. It's too bad. Even then, the spokesperson could have said, this is the 9th time I've had to deny a stupid rumor about the Prince of Wales and the princess, then the Princess of Wales, of joining a Donald Trump property. I mean, really, seriously, 5 times I've had to shoot down rumors that they were going to buy a property directly from Donald Trump. What do you think is happening here, press people? What's the common denominator? It's not that they keep trying to buy Trump properties. They don't. They've never tried. They've all been false rumors. What's interesting here is that they all keep coming from Donald Trump, and you keep chasing them as though they're true. He is a liar. But that's a problem we're all familiar with now, but this all could have been nipped in the bud so much earlier, see? All right, well, it's complete nonsense. They have not joined the club. Trump's princely claim a king-size fib, the Palm Beach Post declared. The prince and princess have not paid any money to join, a Buckingham Palace spokeswoman added to the Sun Sentinel. If Mr. Trump has made them honorary members, then that's up to him. Mar-a-Lago initially stood by the claim. Can you imagine that? Anything with public names was handled personally by Mr. Trump, said Deborah Tornabin, the resort's special events director. The prince and princess are members. I know Donald handled it personally. Not only are they standing by it, they're saying, I'm standing by it because Mr. Trump said so personally. And my job depends on taking him at his word, I guess. I don't believe they are honorary members. As far as I know, it was coincidence they each joined, Merlin added. So I guess at that point they're divorced or separated. The story is absolute nonsense, utterly untrue. Neither of them is a member. I'm sure they said neither as opposed to neither, said a Buckingham Palace spokesman to the Palm Beach Daily News. This story was concocted by Mr. Trump to secure publicity for his club. It is a matter of regret that he feels he can use the names of the members of the royal family to do so. Mr. Trump was forced to clarify. All right. So remember what we had just read, right? Where was it? Merlin. I don't believe Ms. Merlin here. I don't believe they're honorary members. As far as I know, it was coincidence they each joined. And then Deborah Tornabin saying, anything with public names was handled personally by Mr. Trump. I know Donald handled it personally. The prince and princess are members. So here's the clarification. Trump says, I wrote to them both offering honorary memberships. Mr. Trump said in New York, we haven't heard any response yet, but Prince Charles has been to Mar-a-Lago, and I know he likes it, Trump said, according to the Palm Beach Daily News. New York Times added a correction to their story, and the Associated Press put out a new report citing the Buckingham Palace statement shooting down their claim. I didn't say they signed. I said they were members, Trump said again to New York Magazine in January of 1995. The magazine added, it was simply then another case in which the fantastic, rarefied world of Donald Trump clashed with the known universe. And that's a very cute way of putting it at the end. But I mean, really, honestly, this should have been the end of his career. But instead, it was the beginning of, anyway, so annoying. And by the way, I mean, there's another claim now hanging out there that Prince Charles has been to Mar-a-Lago and liked it. Is that even a claim that's been checked? Is that a verifiable thing? Did it not get discussed here because it's a well-known fact that he was? Why didn't they mention it? That everyone knows that Prince Charles visited the club in 1989 or 91 or whatever. I'm surprised that that's still hanging out there. But I guess given the, quite honestly, the sloppiness with which the article was put together, I guess I'm not terribly surprised. I like Andrew Kaczynski's work. It's very interesting, but this seems pretty slapdash. So I was probably rushing to get it out there to get an exclusive scoop. What a scoop. Well, he did. He got it. Anyway, time for another of our famous breaks. We're famous around the world for these breaks. Princess Di is going to buy one of these breaks, as a matter of fact. So let's pause for 2 minutes to bring you this exclusive message from Prince Charles, who totally sponsors the show and wants to buy it. We might as well just make that clear. Okay, when we come back, we'll head back, turn around, and go back to actual things that matter. Harry Reid changing his mind on impeachment, for instance. And I don't know, I feel like maybe we'll read some of these articles that make great pitches for doing the right thing, even though you already know what it is. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal, except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, and let's see, where to go next. As I mentioned, I started reading the Harry Reid story, and I just want to at least get some sense of the change of heart that he's had and how it comes about. We began by saying, so former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid said in an interview published Monday that the House should open an impeachment inquiry into President Trump, despite counseling against the move earlier. It's not the right thing to do nothing, Reid told USA Today. It's not the right thing to jump into impeachment without doing an inquiry. Any such inquiry, he said, should primarily focus on giving the American people a view of what's going on, which ordinarily you'd think is pretty good politics, right? I mean, I'll pose that challenge. Tell me, pundits, where is the bad politics in giving the American people a view of what's going on? I'd be curious to know. Oh, well, we want them to focus on what could be going on under new policies, because everyone wants to talk about targeted tax credits or something like that. I don't know that that's the case. Anyway, Reid addressed concerns that the process would allow Trump to claim he had been exonerated, since impeachment proceedings would be doomed in the Republican-controlled Senate. And here's how he did it. That has been one of the big arguments against the impeachment, Reid said. Why make Trump a hero by saying they couldn't impeach me? However, that risk is all the more reason why the inquiry is the right thing to do, he said. In other words, because if you're afraid of, I mean, it makes logical sense, right? If you're afraid that Trump will look at an acquittal by the Senate and say, look, they didn't convict me, so I've been exonerated, right? I mean, that's a fear. So if in response you say, well, then fine, I won't give him that opportunity, I simply won't impeach him, then, of course, he will just say, I'm exonerated because they didn't impeach me. I mean, I've been over this discussion, this point, more on Twitter, I think, than on the air. But, I mean, again, everything's chicken and egg. I can't tell where people are necessarily individually as voters, but here's my belief. I believe that there's a lot of people out there that, one, haven't read the Mueller report, two, have seen people say that the report exonerates him, and if you're inclined to be a Trump supporter or you're a Republican, whatever, with or without Trump support, that's enough for you. Look, the president said he was exonerated, and I'm inclined to believe him. But for most people, they're not inclined to believe him. But they are inclined to believe that if he had done something seriously wrong, Congress would impeach him. And they haven't. So it must be true that he hasn't done anything particularly seriously wrong. So the other alternative, of course, is the Democrats are so feckless, weak, and political that even though Trump has done something so terribly wrong, they won't impeach him. And so, it's interesting because some pundits would say, see, that's because they're so focused on policy and ousting him at the ballot box. Whereas other people will say, no, it's because they are either share the blame for Trump or secretly want his policies to pass or just don't know what they're doing and are incompetent to the task. All of those are apparently reasons that middle-aged, middle-of-the-road voters are going to say, and so therefore I will elect them. And I mean, dumber things have happened, right? I mean, I don't think it would be that difficult to convince me that a large swath of Americans are just that unthinking. Well, they're incompetent, and I love incompetence, so I'll take it. I find it hard to understand, but I don't know. It was explained to me earlier how existentialism drives the positions of the nihilistic, scorched earth Republicans, too. So I guess anything is possible. Anyway, polling indicates a majority of Americans oppose impeaching Trump, with the most recent poll in the wake of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation showing 41% support, which is really, as impeachment goes, is huge amounts of support. However, Reid said that further investigation could move the needle on the idea. I'm not even certain that it needs to be moved, as I said earlier. But Reid says, I think that's one reason an inquiry should go forward, to find out how the public reacts to this, he told USA Today. Reid said he would reach out on the subject to Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who has consistently opposed impeachment and with whom Reid regularly communicates. An impeachment inquiry, they helpfully explain, in which the House would establish a panel to investigate potential high crimes and misdemeanors by Trump, and that's not necessarily true. They could just hand it over to the Judiciary Committee, would be distinct from impeachment proceedings and would not guarantee them. Reid, who retired in 2017, was a member of the Senate the last time the chamber conducted an impeachment trial after the House voted to impeach then-President Clinton. Reid's interview came as Democratic House leadership makes efforts to appear unified on the issue. Majority Whip James Clyburn, the number 3 Democrat in the House, suggested to CNN's Jake Tapper on Sunday that Trump's impeachment was inevitable, but walked back his comments Monday after a meeting with leadership. I'm probably farther away from impeachment than anybody in our caucus, Clyburn told reporters Monday night. We will not get out in front of our committees. We'll see what the committees come up with. I've said that forever. At least 55 House lawmakers have publicly voiced support for opening impeachment proceedings. Okay, so that's where we are. Thanks, Harry Reid, and kumbaya to you, because you're just such a dumb hippie, just like the rest of us here in Bloggerland. Anyway, man, there's a lot of interesting stories out there, and many of them are extraordinarily important. But I think we might have to do some timeline work here. I had a story, from yesterday where the House Judiciary Committee finally voted to hold Barr in contempt. What I have here, let's see, at first there was a story that said that they will do it. Then I think the BuzzFeed news story here is the one that says that they did. So let's just get that one on the record. Yes, the House Judiciary Committee voted to hold Bill Barr in contempt. The full House will now have to vote to hold the Attorney General in contempt. The committee's move comes shortly after President Trump asserted executive privilege to prevent Democrats from obtaining the full report. So that's an important point for timeline. He's in contempt, they told us last month. I mean, it's only June 5th here. But you remember, I bring that up because there was some dispute over what it meant for the committee to say that they were going to hold the contempt vote next month. And that made it sound like it was a really long time away. And people were reminding me, well, like next month is next week. And here it is, June 4th, yesterday, that they did this thing. Wait a second. Hold on a second. Am I looking at an old article here? Yes, I am. What is this? How come? Because this is... I thought that for Barr, they had not yet had a contempt vote. But this is dated from May 8th. The House Judiciary Committee voted to hold Bill Barr in contempt. Then it would go to the House. And I wanted to certainly point out to you that this is the way the process works. The committee votes to hold him in contempt, but it's contempt of Congress, not contempt of the committee. So the committee's resolution on contempt has to get forwarded to the House floor. The House then holds him in contempt and can take that to court, although we did learn yesterday in talking with Armando that there are certain judges on the federal bench in D.C. who think that houses of Congress don't have standing to move unilaterally, despite the fact that this actually was, until recently, a fairly settled question. Although I did wonder, the first round of contempt of Congress proceedings with John Conyers and his suit back in the George W. Bush days, I wondered whether someone would argue that it's contempt of Congress and not contempt of the House, that you needed to have the Senate's assent on all this. And so far, nobody has held that you do, but I guess now the door is open thanks to the rulings we discussed yesterday that just toss all the precedent out. So I am now not clear, given that this is dated May 8th, where we are on contempt for Barr, but I do have this other story I was going to use to follow up on that maybe we'll have to depend on what was supposed to be the follow-up to bring us the real news. Zoe Tillman, and I don't know whether she pronounces the E in that. Some people say Zoe for Z-O-E, but Zoe Tillman, a reporter covering courts and justice for BuzzFeed News, tweeted this yesterday. DOJ sent a letter to the House Judiciary Committee saying that the committee had narrowed its request for documents regarding Mueller's investigation to the point where DOJ is now willing to resume negotiations for Barr's testimony if the committee undoes its contempt vote for Barr. And I guess that must be, okay, and there's a link, and that must be, I clicked on it thinking that was, and I put away the story thinking that was the latest reporting from Zoe Tillman on the issue, and it's not. It's old reporting. And I wonder if maybe if I click on her name, maybe I can bring up the latest Judiciary Committee activity, and I guess not. Her last reporting was on that strange case on the wall that we discussed yesterday. Judge ruled House Democrats can't sue Trump over his plan to pay for the border wall. The weird precedent-ignoring ruling was the last thing she wrote about in BuzzFeed. So, yeah, she's not going to be the one that brings me up to date by printed articles anyway. I have to read her tweet about what happened. So now the DOJ is saying, well, if you undo the contempt vote against the Attorney General, then I will resume negotiations for my testimony, which I saw a lot of people reacting to, I think quite properly, saying, no, that's just a delaying tactic. It's just a trap. If they agree to undo the vote, he'll just go back to not cooperating, and then they'll have to redo the vote. I don't see any real reason why they have to undo the vote. If there was a vote of the House to hold him in contempt, that would have to be undone, presumably, if he were going to negotiate a voluntary testimony at some point. But the vote of the committee doesn't do anything by itself, so I think they should just be able to hold on to it. But, they're looking for a way to delay. Is there any substantive argument made here? This actually was from yesterday, and a letter signed by Stephen Boyd, Assistant Attorney General, making the following argument. I write in response to your May 24th letter to the AG and counsel to the President, as well as your May 10th letter to the AG concerning the April 18th subpoena to the DOJ by the Judiciary Committee. I'm shortening things here. Your May 24th letter expresses the committee's willingness to engage in further negotiations to resolve this dispute and purports to offer to identify specific materials that, if produced, would be deemed to satisfy the subpoena, while also prioritizing requests for materials from the department. As you know, your letter comes well after the committee rejected good faith offers, as they call them, by the department to accommodate the committee's subpoena in much the same manner. Instead of pursuing the department's proposed framework for potential production, the committee precipitously voted, by the way, on May 8th to recommend that the House of Representatives hold the Attorney General in contempt of Congress. So I guess, let's see, that was an April 18th subpoena. They waited until May 8th to vote to recommend that the full House hold him in contempt. That's very precipitous. From April 18th subpoena to May 8th vote. As we have previously communicated, that vote was premature and unnecessary. The department was disappointed by the committee's abrupt termination of ongoing negotiations aimed at reaching a reasonable accommodation that respects both sides. Legitimate interests of both sides, legitimate interests regarding the materials sought. Further, the department is disappointed by news reports indicating that Democratic leaders have scheduled a contempt vote in the House for June 11th, 2019. So again, just a little bit of timeline information. How long this takes and why Armando and I are constantly harping about how much time it takes and how quickly you have to move. April 18th subpoena, so 18th to 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 10 days. I can just count that way, 18 to 28. 10 days, so 28th, 29th, 30th, 30 days in April. So 12 days pass in April, and then we still got to get up to May 8th. So 20 days, nearly 3 weeks, right? So you're subpoenaed, you don't show. It takes 3 weeks to getting to a vote in the committee to recommend that the full House hold him in contempt. From there, it is 8 to 16 days until they write another letter saying we can continue to negotiate, because the vote on the floor of the House isn't until June 11th. So the committee votes May 8th, and a month and, what do we got here? So 31 days in May, but a month and another 3 days. So something in the order of 34, almost 5 weeks were to pass between voting in the committee that he should be held in contempt and having a floor vote on actually ratifying those charges of contempt. And only at that point do you then decide, okay, well, what will we do about it? Will we refer it to the U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C. to try to prosecute Bill Barr, or will we go some other route, or what? And then, of course, that would be challenged, and you'd find, a year-long process working that one through the courts. But again, April 18th is the subpoena, and it isn't until April, May, June, almost 2 months later, that there would be a contempt finding by the House, and without even involving the courts yet. No litigation at that point would have been undertaken at all to try and enforce this contempt vote. Anyway, so now continuing on with their letter. Additionally, your letter contains multiple inaccuracies regarding the subpoena, the interaction between the department and the committee to date, and the department's proposal to establish a framework for potential production of documents to the committee. The department will be pleased to correct the record in separate correspondence to the committee. In your May 24th, 2019 letter, the committee appears to recognize that the subpoena is unworkably overbroad and offers, for the first time, to narrow the subpoena's scope to cover a much more limited set of documents. The department believes that the committee's new offer reflects a more reasonable request and could mitigate some of the legal barriers to disclosure that we have discussed. To that end, the department is prepared to resume negotiations with the committee regarding accommodations of its narrowed subpoena, provided that the committee takes reasonable steps to restore the status quo ante by mooting its May 8th vote and removing any threat of an imminent vote by the House of Representatives to hold the Attorney General in contempt. Indeed, given the committee's offer to narrow the scope of the subpoena, it would hardly make sense for the full House of Representatives to act upon the committee's prior recommendations to hold the Attorney General in contempt for not complying with a subpoena that even the committee now appears to acknowledge was overbroad and seeking immediate disclosure of the entirety of the special counsel's investigative files. As we have made clear from the outset, the department remains mindful of its constitutional obligation and its desire to explore ways it can accommodate, to the nearest extent possible, Congress's legitimate interests in materials, relating to the special counsel's investigation, as the department's recent dealings with your colleagues on the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence demonstrate. As you know, the department recently negotiated a mutually acceptable accommodation with the Intelligence Committee regarding a similar subpoena for materials relating to the special counsel's investigation. Accordingly, the department has been able to produce documents for in-camera review, that would be closed chambers review, ordinarily for a judge, but I don't know whether they're talking about allowing basically closed-door review by members of the Intelligence Committee in a secure setting in response to a narrowed and more reasonable request. The only reason we were not able to engage in a similar accommodation with the Judiciary Committee is that you insisted on taking the unnecessary step of holding a contempt vote less than 3 weeks. Oh no, not less than 3 weeks. After issuing the subpoena at a time when negotiations were ongoing. And then, pleasantries and a closing. So, by the way, that's where DOJ is. They now consider being 3 weeks late in honoring a subpoena to be too rushed for essentially making a recommendation that a contempt vote be held. I mean, I don't know how the Judiciary Committee wants to respond to that, but it seems to me that, one response would be to say, well, there's still, where are we? We're June 5th. Right now, there's still a week, almost a week, until the contempt vote is scheduled on the House floor. So I would say, tell us what you're thinking of producing for us, and we have a week to delay the contempt vote. And I think that's a fairly simple thing to do. I would say that they're better off just saying nothing really happens, and not much happens after a House vote on the floor either, but that would be the next formal step. We just won't take that step until we finish our negotiations, perhaps. That's a possibility, but undoing the committee vote doesn't make any sense. Why not instead simply say, okay, you want a show of good faith? We'll reschedule the vote for June 18th. And that'll be that'll be our offer to you. Anyway, so that's out there. I guess the other thing I wanted to add in terms of timeline, we had Hope Hicks having been directed by the president not to cooperate with her subpoena, and there's some development on that front. David Morgan reporting for Reuters. Ex-Trump aide Hicks, the existential question lady, Hicks agrees to hand over campaign documents to Congress. I don't know how much of what they were seeking that represents, but it is at least partial movement on that front. Former White House Communications Director Hope Hicks, once a close aide to President Donald Trump, she steamed his pants, as a matter of fact, has agreed to turn over documents related to his 2016 election campaign to congressional investigators, a top Democratic lawmaker said on Tuesday. It sounds like a euphemism, right? Not even a good one. She steamed his pants. I think we were just reading about, at one point, Princess Diana steamed Donald Trump's pants, too, in a different sense. The agreement marks a step forward for House of Representatives Judiciary Committee Chairman Gerald Nadler. Stuff is too formal. I got to specialize in whittling these reports down to what you need to know. The agreement marks a step forward for Nadler in investigations of Trump and his inner circle, digging into the campaign, his turbulent presidency, and business interests. Hicks, Trump's former campaign press secretary, agreed to supply the documents from the campaign, despite a White House directive advising her not to provide the committee with materials from her subsequent time at the White House. But that doesn't actually follow. And maybe this is a concession, because I think the story was that he was asserting executive privilege, which was a questionable assertion even with respect to materials that were circulated inside the White House. I mean, he may very well end up prevailing on that one, but questionable. Everything's questionable. He was on much less solid ground saying, yeah, executive privilege over materials that had nothing to do with being the executive. I wasn't the executive yet when we dealt in these campaign materials. There's no executive privilege there, and I guess it looks like they're backing away from that claim without dropping it. This is sort of backing away in name only. That is to say, they are not acknowledging so far the inappropriateness of their having asserted executive privilege over campaign materials. They're simply saying, well, we now agree to let you go ahead and hand over certain materials, but we reserve the right to continue to pretend that there's executive privilege that can be asserted here. We're just choosing to waive it with respect to campaign material. So she and, that is Hicks, and former White House lawyer Annie Donaldson were subpoenaed on May 21st, if you're following that timeline, by the Judiciary Committee as part of its inquiry into, guess what, Mueller, the Mueller investigation. I don't need to tell you all of that. Hicks's attorney, Robert Trout, another name for the roster, said in a letter to Nadler that Hicks would not hand over documents related to Trump's time in the White House and his presidential transition period because administration attorneys believe the papers may be subject to a claim of executive privilege by Trump. Also somewhat questionable in the transition thing, but I'd allow some possible leeway towards that. I mean, what do you think you're transitioning to, right? I might be willing to give them, well, not Trump. I won't give them the benefit of the doubt on anything, but other presidents possibly. Trout said Hicks was handing over a computer disk, wowie wow, containing documents from Trump's campaign period that were not previously given to the committee. He said his law firm would not provide any documents it had received from the White House and transition team. We already heard that. The White House instructed Hicks and Donaldson not to turn over records related to the administration, saying material involves executive branch confidentiality, interests, and executive privilege. Hicks resigned from her White House job in February of 2018. Seems like a million years ago. That's actually longer back than I thought. February of 2018? Really? The two former aides, quote, do not have the legal right to disclose the White House records to third parties, unquote. That's according to Pat Cipollone, White House counsel, in a letter to Nadler. Nadler commended Hicks for providing some documents relating to the campaign, or as he said, some documents. I don't know where his emphasis was. I thank her for that show of good faith. But he went on to criticize what he called Trump's continued obstruction of Congress. The president has no lawful basis for preventing these witnesses from complying with our request. The committee chair told reporters that Hicks and Donaldson, Donaldson was a former aide to Don McGahn, they too could both face contempt proceedings if they don't comply. But we see how slowly those things move. When we ask for documents to be turned over, we expect all the documents to be turned over. We're the Congress of the United States, said Representative Jamie Raskin, a Democrat on Nadler's committee. The president and the White House continue to play games, and it's not a game, Raskin said. Donaldson didn't respond to requests for comment. The House is poised to vote on contempt resolution against Barr on the 11th. On Tuesday, the Justice Department made that offer with the letters. Nadler rejected that request in a letter to Barr later in the day, urging the Attorney General to return to negotiations without conditions and saying there was simply no justification for your refusal. So that's where we now stand. The committee is seeking from Hicks any material that she's got on the June 2016 meeting at Trump Tower, the Veselnitskaya meeting. The subpoena also seeks documents relating to any payments made to Trump's convicted former personal lawyer, Michael Cohen. Cohen, of course, you know his deal. Representative Doug Collins, top Republican on the House Judiciary Committee, called for hearings on Russian meddling in the 2016 campaign and potential threats to the 2020 race. Okay, that sounds interesting and fun. And the committee has scheduled separate hearings with Hicks and Donaldson for later this month, also seeking documents from the two former aides on dozens of topics, ranging from an FBI investigation into former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn to the termination of James Comey and the appointment of Mueller. So that's where we stand with Hope Hicks. How does she do it? We'll find out later on this month. Plenty more that we still need to get to. Tomorrow being only Thursday, I think we'll be in good shape and can squeeze most of this stuff in. Speaking of Michael Cohen and Nadler, or not Nadler, but Nader, the one without the L, George Nader, who was busted on child porn charges just a little while ago, although they've probably apparently been pending for quite some time. An interesting story all by itself. Elliot Broidy back in the news as well. And as it turns out, he too, as he's shared another lawyer with a weird perv, and I think it was Nader at that point. I'm remembering this from yesterday. We'll have to look into exactly what this weird network is here. But you remember he and Trump shared Cohen as an attorney for their cover-ups with mistresses, and now he shares another attorney with child porn guy George Nader. So I don't know. It gets weirder every day. Lots to catch up on. We'll do that. Of course, Justice will bring you the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next, and we'll see what I've missed that he'll pick up. We'll be back Thursday, Friday, trying to line up a special show with yet another guest. That'll be fantastic if we can make it work. Stay tuned. Justice will bring you up to speed on everything
From Daily
else.
Co's Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Are you ready for this? Trump pushes for up to 20 years in prison for Native Americans protesting pipeline construction on sacred lands. Religious freedom. Trump's campaign lines his pockets by renting space in Trump Tower it doesn't even need. And Russia humiliates Trump by calling him a liar. They should just start selling Trump property.